Oh, right, Geoff. Now, envious reading your book. You were flown all over the world, quite often in some style. Did you ever make it across to Australia?
Yeah, I did. And we went, obviously Breeders' Cups and Dubai World Cups and everything. They were fantastic. I went to Australia twice for Melbourne Cup. First time was actually nothing to do with being on expenses. My brother took me. He worked for British Airways. He was a cabin services director, and so he rang me up one day and said, was when I was at Alive. He said, "Do you want to come on a trip?" And I said, "Where are you going?" And he said, "New York, Los Angeles, Honolulu, Fiji, Melbourne, Sydney." I said, "How much is that going to cost me?" He said, £630, but it's 10%, so 63 quid. I thought it's not bad, is it? So I said, "You're right, I'm in." So anyway, we went, and I was always more or less always in business. I think I was in economy once because they could just move me up. And when we landed in Sydney, I was actually in the cockpit with the crew, obviously long before 9/11, landing there next to the Opera House, and it was fantastic. So it was terrific. Anyway, we left. We were down to leave Melbourne to come out to come away on Melbourne Cup Day, and I said to my brother, "This is the race that stops a nation. I've never ever been." So I said, he said, "If you want to stay, we can change your ticket. You can catch us up in Fiji on the way back." So he did that for me. So I got him a press badge, and I said to the guy, "How do I get into the press room?" So he said, "Accreditation." So he said, "You've got to go to the secretary's office." So I went there, and there was a fellow called Eric Jeffries. I found out after. I asked him to, I said, "Can I have accreditation? I come from Britain." I showed him my journalist pass and everything. He said, "I was 6 months waiting list." So I said, "Well, I didn't know I was coming until a month or so ago." So he clearly wasn't budging. So I said, "Well, can you just give me a member's badge for the day to float around?" 3 months waiting list. So I said, "You're not being very helpful, are you?" So he said, "We don't really want your kind here." So I said, "Oh, my kind." So he said, I said, "What's my kind then?" So he said, "Well, you come over here, you pums, and you shout and scream, and you think you own the world." And I said, "Oh, well, that's rich come a convict like you." So maybe it wasn't the best thing to say, but because he called security and I got thrown out. But I got back in my press badge, and I had a lovely day, and I wrote an article. My editor asked me my day at the Melbourne Cup, and they gave me, I'll never forget, Ozzy Fletcher, my editor, first one ever, great guy. He gave me £47 for the feature, and so the whole trip cost me £16. They had a few complaints from people at Earls Court and Barons Court, where all the Aussies are, but yeah, that was a day. But I went back about 10 years later, officially, when I got in, and it was a wonderful day, and it was the race that stops a nation, and I loved it. I was great.
What a game! Now, going to jockeys, from when you started to, well, you're still going now. How much? How much of this has the sort of person that became the top jockey changed, or has it? Or have they?
No, I don't think they have actually. Not the guys I used to know. I mean, obviously, Leicester. All never been different. Willie's Willie. I had some because he was going back to my brother. Willie Carson was on my brother's plane once, and my brother knows nothing about racing with chalk and cheese, and he was in first class, and my brother said. He looked on the passenger list at Carson W, and he was about quite small as Willie is, and he said, "Are you Willie Carson, a jockey?" Eh? So he's "Yeah, I am." Willie, "Yeah, yes, me." So Alan says, "Well, you must know my brother." "Who's that then?" So he said, "Geoff Lester." So Willie said, "What, Sporting Life?" So he said, "Yeah, I know him. He's a prat." So my brother said, "Why did you say that?" So he said, "No, he's only been in the game 5 minutes." He said, "If I got beat on a favourite or something, he slags me off in the Sporting Life." So he said, "Well, he's been in the game longer." He said he joined the Life the same week as I joined British Airways, but I think then it was about 17 years. So he said, "You're talking rubbish." Just give me. So he said, anyway, he said, "Just give me some playing cards." So pack of playing cards. So he gives him playing cards, and Alan says, £1. He said, "What, in first class play?" No, he said, we lost so many playing cards on British Airways that now they charge him £1 for everybody. You're only saying that because he's your brother. And Alan said, "If you don't shut up," he said, "you'll have soup in your lap in a minute." So Willie said, "Of all the stewards," anyway, we laughed about it afterwards. I mean, we went to Royal Ascot. I went to the Royal Ascot preview in London, and I took him there, drove him back, and he fell asleep all the way back home. And and I said, "You can pay the car park." He said, "What, me?" I said, "I've driven you to London and back." And Willie hasn't changed at all. He's still going great in his 80s now.
Now, it says on the cover of your book, time of my life that you've witnessed superstars from Arkle to Frankel. What would you say were your most memorable moments of the action out on the turf that you witnessed?
Oh, Frankel's day at York when it was really emotional with Henry Cecil. Obviously, I mean, in such a bad way, but he looked terrible, Henry. But I think Frankel kept Henry going, and that was a really emotional day, really. Being at Sandown to see Arkle win the Gallagher Gold Cup with my dad was wonderful. We stood by the last fence. In those days, you could get right up to the last fence, and Pat Taff wouldn't be the best jockey in the world, but he's a great horseman. He was weaving his way through the crowd. It was just the olden days like that were great. And some of the best horses. I mean, one of the best horses I ever saw at Sandown was Tingle Creek. It must be exhilarating to ride. I used to talk to Steve Smith Eccles, and who rode it all the time, and Steve, he said this horse has got 2 speeds, fast and effing fast. So, and I love Stingle Creek, but I once they sent me to Stratford, and this horse had, he got beaten by there. He should have won. He was about 11 years old in Stingle Creek, but he loved Sandown, those fences around there. And he went to Stratford and he got beat by a horse called Old Chad. I think he was giving it 2.5 stone. What's that? £35. And I was doing the back page lead that day on the Stratford. No Sunday paper, so it's for Monday's paper. So they said make it sing. So I think my headline now was retire him now, Tom, before the rot sets in, because he was trained by Tom Jones, and Ian Watkinson, who rode Tingle Creek often, reminds me of this story. And so anyway, they weren't happy. The Tingle Creek team came out 3 weeks later, back to Sandown, broke the track record. So I thought I got that one wrong. And when I eventually got married in 1978, and my brother-in-law was the best man, as I say, and he used to telegrams in those days, and he said, they made a few people made speeches, and he said, we got one telegram here, and it was the boys in the office who sorted it out, and it said, have a great day, Geoff. You went before me, Tingle Creek.
Brilliant. What do you think the magic ingredient that's kept your sort of love of the turf burning all these years? Is it sort of the racing itself, the atmosphere, the lifestyle, the betting, the free trips around the world? I mean, what would it be?
I think the trips around the world's great. I mean, I know, free trips, it makes it even better. And you meet some people. I mean, I met John Gosling in America for the first time, and John obviously was his father. I used to back his father's horses, Charles Gosling's, years ago. And I mean, I met him in Chicago, and we became great mates. And and when he had his first Derby winner, he had a big party in Newmarket, and I think it was only me and one other journalist were invited. And it was a great party, and I've stayed with him overnight at Newmarket. And he's a great trainer, and he could have been, if he was in the election coming up on July the 4th, I think he'd be a man to be on, because he knows so much about everything. He's such an articulate and intelligent guy, but a brilliant trainer. And I remember when I was alive, he was having a bad year, and David Ashworth, I like, a great fella, but he was doing a piece, and his headline was "Can this man train?" And John hadn't sort of trained a classic winner at the time, and they were very upset, and John's wife Rachel, she was very upset by the piece. But anyway, that year he won the Leisure, his first classic with Shantou, and from there on it was onwards and upwards. It was man, he's a great fellow, and he did the forward in this book. Get £10, you get it from Weatherby's or the Racing Post.
Other bookshops are available.
Indeed.
No, we didn't talk about this before. It's not in my questions, but something that's sort of come to me as we've been talking. In the days when you started, it was Mr. So-and-so to you and that sort of thing. It seems that the sort of snobbishy class barrier thing in racing has totally come down. I mean, anybody can befriend anybody. You're not sort of looked down on as you possibly would have been. You think that's true? I mean, it's just an observation I've made while we've been talking.
Yeah, I think you're right there, Simon. I mean, years ago, it was, if you asked a trainer what you're going to do with this horse, and he says, it's between me and my owner, and end of story, he would walk away. But these days, I mean, in jumping, like Nicky Henderson, Paul Nicholls, they're superstars, and Andy Willie Mullins as well. Brilliant, and in flat race as well. I mean, Michael Stout could be tricky in his days, in his heyday, But John Gosden's brilliant, and most of them. Aidan's fantastic. I mean, he'll mention every person to do with a horse and all that. But he's been great, Aidan. And yeah, I mean it's great. I mean, I know when I was doing the TV with Michael Stout, and as I say, he can be tricky. And he'd won the Guineas with King's Best, and I think it was on Channel 4, so they get the first interview, and the second interview was Cornelius for the radio. Then they got to make the presentation, and then me, because for doing a piece for Sky for the following day. And so I said, Michael, could you just do one more interview for Sky? That was Michael, it was a big sigh. Okay then. So we're on the steps outside the weighing room, and he's chatting away about King's Best, and it's been probably gone on about 60 seconds. It was only going to be about a 2-minute piece, and this guy in my ear said, "Oh Jesus, I forgot to put a tape in." So he said, "Can you ask him to start again?" I cannot believe it. So I said, "Michael, it was a technical problem, and on the other end, I said, could we do it again?" He said, I've got to go and see Hamdan. I've got to see Hamdan. I said, "It's got to go on Sky tomorrow. You will come back." He said, "I'll come back after the next race." And to be fair, he did come back after the next race. And I mean, Stouty can be tricky. But one day I went to do a feature with him, and he said to me after, he said, "You've done your homework before you came." He said, "I'm impressed with that." So I rang him up a month later because the racing channel wanted to do some horses to follow, and he said, "Can I?" I said, "Can I come round?" He said, I said, "Because you said I could come any time." I said, "Not that." He said, "Not that quick." So he put the phone down, but no, with a big laugh. But no, Stouty's great. I mean, most of them are okay now. I think we are very, very lucky, and the present day trainers are, they're spoilt.
Now, your career as a racing journalist spanned decades. Do you think, looking at what it's like now, that you had the best of it?
Yeah, I do. I mean, obviously we all do that. I'm 76 now, but I mean, saw the Rolling Stones live many times, and my wife saw the Beatles live. We've had the 60s there. I was at the World Cup in 1966, last time we won anything, and the football team. And racing wise, yeah, I do think I still love the racing. I mean, the top class racing, but working as a racing journalist, I think I definitely had the best time.
I mean, how do you feel for the new guys that are trying to get into the game? First of all, what advice would you give somebody who's dead set on becoming a racing journalist? And what do you think about the fact that they don't even get sent to the racecourse anymore?
Yeah, this is it. People these days they just tell the sub to take it off the CV. I suppose that's partly saving money, but it's not the same, is it? You're just scrounging off TV interviews. And you've got to see it. You've got to be there on the spot. But I mean, youngsters have come up to me. We've had some, lots of, Mike Cadamole and Simon Holt, both, I wouldn't say my proteges, but when I was working, they used to started doing the commentaries, but they were also doing a report at the same time. So I would try and get them if Simon was working at Brighton. He would do the report at Brighton. I would give him the Brighton rather than sending him to Hereford or somewhere. So he could do the two jobs, because they're class act, and they both went on and became with Channel 4. Simon as a commentator and Mike as an interviewer. So I think it obviously be a different. If you just get the break, you make your own luck in this game, but equally you just need a break as for two. And I think the youngsters, if they got the talent, they'll make it.
Okay, final question. If somebody turned up here with a time machine now and you got half an hour to go back and relive one moment in your career, what would it be?
It's a tricky question. That is a bit tricky. One moment in my career, probably the day that Leicester's Royal Academy. Because I think the first race, Deja was in that first race. We went Willie Carson. They jumped to Shadow. Then there was a really good a mare in America, best mare in America. She broke her leg, right in front of the stands. It was horrific, and lots of people left the track, couldn't watch anymore. The racing needed a lift badly. When the man to do it was the man Leicester, just come out of jail. It was 50 odd, and everyone said he's passed it, and. It just was unbelievable to see him win, and Royal Academy that day. And I think they got 2 paragraphs in the New York Post saying ex-Jailbird wins the mile. So, and they couldn't understand Leicester. Press conference afterwards, you know, somebody said, what's wrong with his mic? We can't hear it. And I said, nothing wrong with his mic. He talks like that, and we can't understand it. But Leicester really, you know, I think he enjoyed himself. When you go back, it was such a wonderful looking horse, that Royal Academy. When he stepped off the lorry when he arrived there, he's just got so much presence. And you know, racing needed something to lift that day, and Leicester gave it to him.
Brilliant. Well, on that note, Geoff, Leicester, thank you very much.
Thanks, Simon.